I'm going to begin the meeting, and then we will, I'll admit others as they sign on. First off, welcome everybody to the Candidates and Budget Night. I'm Jim Danhauser, and I'm pleased to welcome everybody on behalf of the Cotuit Civic Association. We have a lot of ground to cover, and I'd like to move right into the discussion. I know that all of us are a little bit tired of Zoom meetings and would rather be doing this in person, but this was the best alternative that we could come up with to give to people the information that they need to have in connection with the election next week and the annual district meeting. If we run into technical difficulties, I apologize in advance because inevitably we will. Be aware that I am recording this meeting and I will be posting the link to that recording once it is available to our constant contact list tomorrow. In terms of format, as most of you know, there are 3 constituent entities that make up the fire district. That's the water department, the fire department, and the prudential committee. We'll hear from each of those entities tonight regarding their proposed budgets for the coming fiscal year that starts on July 1st, and that will be the subject of next week's district annual meeting. In addition, as you also many know, each year one of the 3 seats on the governing bodies for those 3 entities opens up for election. And we will hear tonight from the candidates for those seats after the budget presentations have been concluded. But first, a brief word about procedures. All attendees have been muted. This is not to try to keep people from having the opportunity to make comment. It is simply the only practical way to conduct the meeting in an orderly fashion. With this many attendees, if we have significant number of open mics, there is inevitably feedback loops and background noise which can distract everyone who is trying to hear what is being presented. So I ask you to please understand that we need you to remain muted unless and until you're called upon to speak. And then once you've spoken, please remute yourself. If you have any question about how to do that, you can hover over where your name and picture appear and you will see the mute and unmute button. In terms of questions, we would ask that you type your questions into the chat function that you see on your screen. To do this, click on the chat button, type your question, and press your enter key. Please try to identify yourself and your address when you're answering a question. And then I will call upon you, or I will read that question to the people who are making the presenting. If you significantly prefer to ask questions yourself, enter your name and address in the chat function, and I'll call upon you when it comes to be your turn to ask the question. In terms of the order of things, budget discussions will come first, followed by the introduction of the candidates. There will be an opportunity to ask questions of district officials after each separate departmental presentation. And the charts that you will see as we go through this will compare the proposed expenses for this year's budget to the prior year approved numbers. So this is the screen that we'll be working with as we begin the departmental presentations. The water department will be going first in just a moment, but I thought it would be useful to orient everybody to what these screens show. These are the formats that roll up into the ADM expense summary that has been posted on the fire district website. What you see for this is the water department. You'll see it for the other departments, as well as for the various areas that the Prudential Committee is responsible for. And on the left-hand side, under account title, you see the specific line item of the expenditure. The water department, what does Article 7 mean? That is simply the article number in the warrants that will be voted upon at the annual district meeting next week. The first column of numbers is the budgeted expenditure for those various line items as they were approved last year for the current fiscal year, which ends on June 30. The second column of numbers is the proposed expenditure in the budget for the forthcoming fiscal year. then you'll see a column marked change this year, which is the percentage change for that line item in this year's budget as compared to last year's approved expenditure, with some comments that are there that will be expanded upon by the various representatives who will be making the presentation. We're going to ask the Water Department to go first. They're going to be represented tonight by Mark Robinson, who is the chair of the Board of Water Commissioners, as well as Chris Wiseman, who is the Water Department manager. So, gentlemen, go ahead.
Thank you, Jim. This is Mark Robinson, the chair of the Water Commission. It's been my privilege to serve as the chair for the last year, and I think we have a very strong commission. We have some very knowledgeable people involved in the commission. We've got a wonderful staff of 5 people, very experienced senior managers, and we also have young operators who are learning their ropes, getting their certifications, and are stepping up in their careers. Our budget is fairly straightforward, and you see no major deviations in significant items. The 3% increase on salaries were merit-based. We did full reviews of all the staff, as well as we did the full review of the superintendent, who did the full reviews of the staff, and we concurred with his conclusions. And like any organization that revolves around its people, we think that this is the major place to be spending our operating expenses. If you can scroll down, Jim, you'll see that the overall increase in the budget is between 4 and 5%. And we reviewed and approved this in March. We were asked to relook at it based on the economic crisis that the country is facing. We did. We saw that there weren't any major new cost items, and so we felt very comfortable in reapproving this budget in April and May. So I'm happy to answer questions, but I would like to have Commissioner Hoppenstadt, who is here, say a few words if he'd like to. I know that Chris Wiseman, our superintendent, will get into any details if people have questions. I would say that the major thing that we want to mention is that this was the first fiscal year involved with the increase in the water rates, and you'll see a significant amount of new revenue that has come in to the district as a result of that, and that was the purpose of the study, looking at the cost of services for the water department. And I think that we're looking at a significant increase, even over what the Prudential Committee suggested was an estimate for this year and for the coming year. So we are expecting and that the district tax would correspondingly be decreased by the amount of extra revenues generated by the water rates. So I'd ask Commissioner Hoppenstadt just to comment before Chris does.
Thank you, Mark. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think we have a great staff. We've done terrific work this past year on the budget, as well as everything else that we've done, and we've done a lot. In terms of the budget, though, you know, I think you hit it right on the nose with the fact that with the rate increase from last year, we expected to be able to cover our expenses, at least between 80 and 90% of those. And we've far exceeded that. We're bringing in over close to $360,000 more than what we've spent in 2020. So I think it was successful, and we'll see how it works out over the next few years. So I'm proud of that. The other thing with regards to the budget is we will be wrapping up the SCADA project, the security project this year, which was a major capital expense for the district, and it's gone really well. It's gone smoothly, you know, and that's a tribute to the staff that's been managing it. They've done a yeoman's job with that, so very proud of them. I think that's about all I had to comment on the budget. So turn it over to Chris.
All right, how you doing, guys? If you could, Jim, go back to the top there. I just got a couple. I'll go over the changes here. Everything's pretty much leveled out. Just quickly, I'll kind of go over the changes. You see a 6.45% increase. Two of our employees have reached a mile point where they get a step increase, where they reach so many years of service and have got their required licensing, so they have an automatic raise anyways at that point. It's 5 years into their job, so that's why that's a little higher than you see, and the wages and overtime reflect that. That's on there. That's why that's gone up as much as it has. Other than that, as we start going through, there's just a couple increases here. Gasoline, heating has gone up a tiny bit, and that just is for current prices and estimates of where we're going to be. Let's see, we have the 25% on gas. People are telling me gas is down as low as it is, but we are actually traveling more miles. We hired a gentleman who is more on the 10-mile radius that we have, and the vehicle has to go back and forth more. So we're actually using more gas than we have in the past. We can't be guaranteed it's going to stay as low as it is. We looked at this originally, it hadn't dropped as much. So we chose to keep it there, and we'll turn in anything that's left over. Stations have increased there on our maintenance because of the new SCADA and security system we put in. There has to be a company that comes in and basically does all the upgrades to it and everything else to keep us top of the line. The sampling that you see there are required by the state. We have no choice but to do those. They come up every 3 to 5 years, and you'll see them. It goes up. Last year it was down because we didn't have to do some. Including on there are some new upcoming contaminants that we're going to try to stay on top of. The telephone was because we needed to get a new system to control the SCADA system to do all our alarms, and we can actually function from home with it to finish any of those. It will actually text us now if there's an alarm in town.
Chris, just for a moment, people are having a little bit of difficulty hearing you, whether you need to get closer to your microphone or...
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Can you hear that a little better?
Yes.
I'll hold it here. Okay. The SCADA system there is for communications from home and for our alarm system that we have that notifies us whenever there's an alarm so we can come down and fix it. Because we are going to 4 times billing, our billing has increased between postage, printing, and office supplies. So those are all things that we need. We didn't do it for anything else. It's just, and last thing on there was computer expense yes, we're going to be going to online paying. We've been trying for a couple of years. It finally looks like we're going to get there. We were hoping to get there before our July billing goes out, but we're still trying. And if not, it will definitely be in there in place for the next line. I think that's really everything that's there. If you have any questions, please ask. I can be a little more specific.
Okay. I have questions that have been posted to the chat function. Jessica Rapgrissetti of 1611 Main Street asks, given the economic crisis, was consideration given to holding off on step and cost of living increases? I guess that's for the commissioners, Mark and or Tom.
Yes, this is Mark. As I indicated, we did go back and look at this budget. As I indicated earlier, we think that the major value that's added to this department is the people who are working for it. And I think anybody who's interacted with our staff would say that they are the most courteous, professional, and helpful people in government, at least that I've seen. I've been working in government for 30 plus years. So we did look at that again, and we did feel that 3% was even lower than probably what we would have liked to recommend, but we felt it reflected the quality of the personnel and the jobs that they've been doing based on the reviews.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. Cynthia Gardner asks a question. Why can't we try and stay within a 2.5% increase like we would have to if we were not a fire district?
This is a budget that's based very closely on what was happening last year. As you'll see, some things have gone up, some things have gone down. When you rattle through it, it's a 4 4.5% increase. I don't think that that's unreasonable given the size of the budget, over $700,000.
Then Ken Malloy had some questions regarding the stabilization fund, the revenues that were supposed to be generated. I actually, and Tom has answered those already in his responses. So I think, Ken, the other clarification on that will come when Ray makes his presentation about the ADM expense summary and the funding summary. You'll get your final answers from there. Amy Cates, you had a question, so you can unmute yourself and ask it now.
My question, Jessica actually opened the door to my question, and my question was along the lines of step increase and increase in pay. And it could be that because I'm self-employed and most of my clients are business owners, I've watched them struggle through COVID, and some of them have been underemployed, unemployed. Some of them aren't even sure that their businesses will ever open up again. And so when I look at a situation of municipal employees who through COVID have been accumulating sick leave and vacation, have often worked from home, maybe half time in the office, maybe half time at home. My thought was that I wonder if people who are employed by municipalities who have benefits, if those people understand what some of the rest of the village has been going through. And I would ask again, would we consider not increasing and just staying level funded because of the opportunity of COVID allowing these people to continue to keep jobs that give them opportunity for sick leave, vacation, a future pension, job security. And so that would be my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Mark, the chair. I would just say that we've all been appreciative of the essential services provided by people that are providing the systems that we need to run our households and our lives. And I don't think it's anything more essential than water service to our residents and our businesses. Chris, I would ask you that 6.45, it says plus step increases. It actually means including step increases, does it not?
That is correct. Yeah, the 3.45 was the step increase from the
Right. And the thing I think you should also mention, Chris, that it's very important for people to gain experience in these positions. To know the village takes time. To know how the system operates takes time. You might want to just comment on that, Chris.
It does. You have to know where things are, we're kind of unique. We have a certain system that we have to run. We're one of the only ones that has this line system for our pH control. These are all things that people have to learn on the job. And these guys did not, we were basically full-time throughout this crisis. There was a little short time when everything first came around where we had a day on, day off kind of thing of working half days, but they were on call 24/7. They couldn't go anywhere. They couldn't do anything. We've basically been working full-time through this whole situation, making sure that everybody had the water for hand washing, for drinking, for everything. So yeah, they've still been working right through, and it's a unique job. They have to stay on the job training here. Yeah.
Tom, would you like to comment? You have to
Yes.
unmute.
Yes, is that okay?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, I totally understand where Amy's coming from on this, and I'm just wondering, if we were to reduce the cost of living increases, say, or the steps, then those funds would go back to the general fund, right? And then that could potentially reduce the tax burden for every individual in the village, right? But I think it's pennies. And that's something maybe Ray could address. I don't think it'd be significant. And I do agree with Mark and Chris that our employees really deserve the raises that they're getting. We wouldn't, we're not being frivolous here. So, but again, perhaps Ray could address, okay, if we were to knock off a couple percent or 3% off that 190, what would that do to the tax burden on the individual residents? And I don't think it would amount to much, but I'm not sure. Thank you.
Chris, a number of people had a hard time hearing what you said in your last set of comments. So if you could try once more, or maybe Mark or Tom, you could say what Chris was saying, because people would very much like to hear what that explanation was that he offered.
Sure, I'm sorry, I must be having a little trouble with my mic here. Basically, I was just saying that we have a unique system here at Cotuit for our pH control, which, and a brand new chlorine system, which is all on the job training. Everybody's learning it as they go. These guys got to be around, and I just mentioned that my guys have basically been on the job full time. They did in the very beginning for about 3 weeks have some working half days. Some people were going back and forth. One guy would work one day, one guy would do another. But the assistant superintendent and myself were there every day, all 8 hours a day. The office manager was there at least 4 days a week. So we didn't really take a lot of time off. I just wanted to, and it was dedicated. We did stay there quite a while and do everything. And that on the job training is a huge part of our.
Okay. Chris, people are still having a hard time, but I think we get the gist of what you were trying to say, which is that the staff has to go, it was working very hard through the whole period. There are some special features of the water system that people need to learn. And so our employees are particularly important. I think that's what you were basically saying.
Yes, that's correct. It's on the job training, a lot of it, yes.
Okay. Cynthia Gardner's comment is many essential workers who work for towns are having to level fund their budgets this year. Example, our own town of Barnstable is asking for that. It's again the same point that is being made, is that the issue is whether in the current economic circumstances a lesser increase would be appropriate, but I think that's been asked and answered. So if anybody has any other questions for representatives of the water department, please let them come out now, or we will move on to the next session. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move on then. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Tom. We will now move over to the fire department presentation, which is being made by Chief Rude. Again, the format of this is the same. You'll see at the top Articles 5 and SDM 1. That's because most of the fire department issues are in Article 5 of the warrant. And SDM is the special district meeting, which will take up one item that did not make it into the warrant for the annual district meeting. And that meeting will occur immediately after the conclusion of the annual meeting next week. Paul, if you'd like to begin.
Good evening. Thank you, Jim. We'll begin with salaries and wages. The biggest noted change over the coming fiscal year from last is the addition of the full-time deputy fire chief position. We had significantly, over the last couple of years, significantly lower callback from firefighters off duty, which results in the station being empty anytime the day staff, the single crew we have on duty, is occupied with ambulance calls or fire calls. It's important to have some type of coverage in the district. So we looked at a redesign. So to bring a deputy chief on, we eliminated the full-time office manager position, and we reduced the standby budget for the firefighters that aren't coming back quite as often as they used to. That cut us down by about $94,000. So it was a small amount more to bring a deputy fire chief on. So that brings us the ability to have 2 full-time managers that can do administration and response duties. So it significantly increases our capability, and at the same time doesn't reduce our administrative ability at all. So that's the biggest change. Other changes include injury. So we increased our injury line item account from $55,000 to $80,000. Our 8-year average for cost of injured firefighters on duty is $78,000 a year. So we brought it in line closer to what our average is over 8 years. Last year, our injured on duty cost was almost $200,000. So this is a step towards that. At the same time, the treasurer has worked on getting a different insurance policy for the district that will help reimburse us for any long-term disability. So that'll pay back to the general fund and help reimburse us for any long-term problems like we've had over the last year. Those are our two big issues. The other amounts of increases in the salary and wage mostly are made up by the new contract that was signed with the full-time firefighters. So the fire commissioners bargained a 3-year contract with the permanent firefighters, which takes effect this July 1st. It increases their pay to bring them in line with the average regional wage for firefighters. That's still significantly $20,000 to $30,000 less per person than some of the other fire districts, including Clallam and Hyannis. We've had some difficulty losing firefighters to neighboring departments. We've lost 2 to Hyannis in the last year due to their significant higher pay rate than we're able to pay. Bringing a new firefighter on has the potential to cost us over $40,000 in the first year. So it's cheaper to pay the firefighters closer to the average than to lose firefighters and try to retrain them. Under operational costs, they've all been level funded with the exception of legal. Over the next year, we anticipate an arbitration with the firefighters union over a disagreement on a disciplinary issue. Arbitrations have a significant legal cost, and we need to be prepared in case those legal costs come to fruition. But other than that, we level funded all our operational costs. Articles, we have an article in the special district meeting for a new chief vehicle. With the addition of a deputy fire chief, chief and deputy are on call 24/7. So we need to give each of us a vehicle to be able to respond rapidly to incidents and carry the equipment we need to mitigate emergencies. The cost of the car is under $10,000 per year. It's a small price to have an individual able to respond 24/7. The existing fire chief's car would be moved to the deputy. That one's 7 years old with over 75,000 miles on it. So it's still usable for another year or so, but it's getting tired. So having us both with vehicles increases our ability to provide services to the community. So overall, our budget increases, our total expenses are 3.26%. And when you add in the, it's 4.42% total for the budget. And when you add in the articles change from last year, we're actually negative 1.17%. The 4.42, if you figure in the growth, change in real estate valuation, that is typically well under the 2.5% that other towns would be responsible for maintaining. So I think it's, we tried to be as conservative as we could and yet still maintain a high level of service to the community. Any questions?
Yes, there are. First question comes from Jessica Rapp-Grassetti, 1611 Main Street. Why was the warrant article for the new vehicles removed from the annual district meeting warrant as it was part of the draft warrant in March? And a second part to that question, wasn't the deputy chief's position solely a response to COVID-19?
Our first question, the deputy chief position was initially in our draft budget presentation. We were notified by the vehicle suppliers, emergency vehicle suppliers, that they were rapidly running out of vehicles which would meet our needs. And the result could be an increased cost or a significantly delayed 10-month or more delay in getting a vehicle. So we brought this issue to the fire commissioners. After consulting with the treasurer, decided that we were expected to have surplus operational funds in excess of $70,000 surplus for the year. And we fire commissioners voted on using a portion of that surplus money to purchase a vehicle earlier, saving the district $2,500 or more and a possible substantial wait time for a vehicle. After further review by the treasurer and consultation with DOR, they found that this wasn't the best idea or didn't quite meet some type of standard. I believe it's a common practice in many places, but they've made the conservative decision to take it off and not to purchase the vehicle in this manner. Unfortunately, this information came after the annual district meeting warrant was closed. So our only option was a special district meeting requiring 7 days notice at the same time as the annual meeting. Second part of the question, deputy's position. We anticipated the deputy's position for this fiscal year. When COVID was rapidly approaching and we were trying to gear up and be as prepared as possible for anticipated increases in responses and reduction in staffing, we made the decision based on available funds to put an acting deputy into position, bringing on another staff member to prepare us to give us an increased ability to get through the COVID crisis. It's an acting position, which we anticipate becoming a permanent position pending the passing of this budget.
I'm sorry, a follow-on question from Jessica is, did you look into purchasing a used vehicle?
No, we didn't look into purchasing a used vehicle. These vehicles, we get about 8 years, 6 to 8 years out of them. They get hard use. They are modified with sirens and lights and lots of add-on. The cost is about, to the district, is about well, with the purchasing outright, it's probably closer to $8,000 a year. You know, the reliability with used vehicles, and honestly, these particular vehicles used, they maintain their value for quite a while. So I don't think the savings would have been worth the risk of the reliability.
Okay. Cynthia Gardner asks, are you suggesting when you compare salaries and benefit packages like educational incentives that our firefighters are paid $20,000 to $30,000 less than comm firefighters?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Paul?
Actually, could I just have one more question? Can you explain the cost of option payment with under the new contract for $41,000? Can you explain what that line item is?
I'm sorry, cost of option? What?
If someone doesn't want to partake in the district's health insurance, can they get a payout? Can you explain that, please?
Yeah, that line item is not in my budget. That's in the treasurer's budget.
Okay, I'll wait. I'll hold on that then.
I can answer the question now. The new firefighters contract has a provision similar to many other neighboring contracts that allows a employee, a firefighter, to get a annual stipend if they choose to forgo the health insurance option from the district. So health insurance for a family plan for a firefighter, typically it costs the fire district a little over $20,000 a year. So if the firefighter chooses to use their spouse's insurance and has to be insured and they have to prove they're insured by some other policy. But if they get their insurance through another provider that doesn't cost the district any money, then the district would split the savings with them. So essentially, somebody that was eligible for a family plan who chose to not take the family plan and use a different one would get a annual stipend broken up into 4 payments a year of approximately $10,000, theoretically saving the district $20,000. Health insurance co-pays for the district are all handled in the treasurer's budget. So the money to use as a stipend to offset that is also handled in the same budget, in the treasurer's budget.
Thank you.
Chief Cynthia Gardner asks, on average, how much did a Cotuit firefighter make in overtime this year?
I don't have those numbers in front of me. I'm sorry. I'll have to, I can bring those to the next fire commissioners meeting or to the annual district meeting.
Or you could send me the information and I can distribute it to people.
Absolutely, I can do that.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Chief Rude and the fire department? Okay, thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Next up is Ray Perone, the district treasurer, and he's going to go through several different categories of items, starting with finance. This, again, follows the same format as you have seen with the other departments. So Ray Perone, if you'd like to start.
Thank you, Jim. Good evening, everyone. Ray Perone, Treasurer. I'm really speaking on behalf of the Prudential Committee, whose budget I'll be presenting. The first is the Finance Department. And in the wage category, there is a 2.5% cost of living increase. But additionally, and it's not on the screen right now, I don't know, Jim, if you can shift it over. The assistant treasurer her salary is being increased by 12% in recognition of the added responsibility she's assuming or has assumed over the past year. This brings her salary in line with the other administrative support staff. I'll try to focus on the major ones. I think the major changes, obviously, if there's a change that I missed that someone has a question about, we can go back and address that. First big change is a positive decline. The Prudential Committee has decided, and the fire commissioners have negotiated a change in the contract that allows us to move from weekly to bi-weekly pay, which will save us a substantial amount of money over the coming year, approximately in excess of $5,000. The next big change is the audit fee. We have put out an RFP for audit services for the next 3 years. One quote that we have is above the amount we've budgeted, one is below. So when we prepared the budget a couple of months ago, we anticipated this type of increase going out for a new audit firm. The bond transfer agent is a $1,500 increase. That's basically the running rate for a bond issue plus oversight of our financial disclosure report that the outside services provide each year. Computer and copy expense is up $4,000. It's really a recognition of the running rate and the annualization of our remote-based cloud system for the accounting package. This was done by the Prudential Committee in December based on the enhanced security that the cloud would provide. It has been an absolute essential piece of our ability to work remotely and maintain the administrative services such as payroll to sustain the district operations. Next is insurance. The quote is based on the agent's quote to me or estimate to me. I won't get an actual quote until late in July for the August renewal, but industry was running at about 8+% for property and casualty, which is our biggest package, including auto in that. Workers' comp is increased by our wage increase. However, as the chief alluded to, we are looking at an insurance policy which might substantially reduce that. We don't have enough information at this time or at the time we prepared the budget to reflect those savings. So with prudence in mind, we projected at a wage increase for our existing policy. Payroll taxes increase basically based on wages, since that's a driver there. And in additional administrative services, we added $6,800 that we pay the town for collector services. Previously, the collector was an elected position, and we paid a small stipend to that person. Since the town has gone to an appointed position, we negotiated with the treasurer a reasonable fund to support that activity, which is very much the same as the price that we pay the assessor for the town assessor services. And I would have to say that the service level since the change has been dramatic and very beneficial. Overall, this results in an 8% increase in the finance budget for the coming year. And it's primarily 8% in wages and 8% in operating components. Jim, shall we go on?
I think, Ray, it might make sense for us to pause because there will be questions about the finance section in particular, and then we can
Okay.
cover the rest of them all at one shot.
Okay, very good.
The first question on the finance department comes from Jessica Grissetti. She said, are you aware that the treasury costs have increased by 11.69% in 3 years, going from $36,000 to $85,000?
Yes, I'm aware of it. It is something that I would like to have reduced, but as we reviewed the budget and reviewed it with the Prudential Committee, we believe that this is essential expenditures to maintain the district.
Okay, and Fran Parks has indicated that she would like to address the assistant treasurer's salary increase. So Fran, this would be a good opportunity for you to do that. Fran, if you unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to let everybody to understand why the assistant treasurer is getting the increase. Presently, her per wage payment is less than what the custodian at the Freedom Hall makes. And that's because the previous assistant treasurer, Tony Sheehan, because she was retired from a municipal organization, had a limit on the money she could make per hour and the hours that she could work. And so when Lisa started, she started at Tony's salary, and it unfortunately has stayed there. And she's woefully underpaid for the work that she does. She's not only the assistant treasurer, she's the human resource officer. She has also been working on paper reduction so that a great many files now are no longer being kept on paper, but they're now being stored in computers and on the cloud, which is very saving the district a great deal of time, people's time. And she's worked very hard to correct some deficiencies that were still existing from previous Treasury administrations, and taking care of that. She handles all the phone calls about the streetlights and numerous other phone calls. And certainly during this period when she's been working at home, and we've all been working at home, she's working, far more than, and so is Ray, than their, allotted time per week. So I know it seems like a lot of money, but she's really been grossly underpaid for the 3 years that she's been here. And I think she's certainly earned it. And oh, and as far as, a lot of things have changed in the Treasury Department. Our fees for bonding used to be considerably less because we went through Cape Cod 5. And they stopped, the gentleman that was doing that basically retired, and they stopped doing it. So the fees for just the bonding and the legal fees for that have gone up essentially astronomically. And so that's part of the increase. I think there are other increases, insurance. We're very lucky this year that we're not going to have a big increase in health insurance, but it's my understanding that next year we could see anywhere from a 5 to 8% increase in health insurance. So, there are a great many things in the treasurer's office that we don't have any control over in terms of insurance and, various other things. They're just expenses that are just always going up. And we certainly are trying our best to be as cost conscious as we can be, because we understand we're spending people's money. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. A comment from Cynthia Gardner. A statement that has often been made in the past and was made tonight by the water commissioners is, if budget amounts are not spent, that the money is returned to the general fund, suggesting that if a budget is inflated, it won't get spent. I was alarmed when the fire department budget had enough money left over this year that they thought they could spend $45,000 to buy a new vehicle. What, if any, amounts have been returned to the general fund by each department in prior years? Now, Ray, I would not expect that you would have those numbers immediately at hand.
Well, I think I can answer in general, Jim, and that is a substantial part of the funding for this year's budget comes from what is referred to as free cash. And free cash is simply the unspent budget for all the departments in the prior year, plus collections over and above what is budgeted for non-tax revenue. So those funds—
And we'll see that more specifically when we get to the ADM expense and funding summaries.
Exactly.
Right. So that is when you can speak to the amount of free cash from not spent from prior years that is being expended in this year's to cover budget increases.
Very good.
Okay. Paul Rude's comment is that the assistant treasurer is extremely competent and is a great asset to the district and the fire department. She makes my job easier on a regular basis.
And mine too.
And Cynthia asks, why is the annual report in the financials unaudited?
Because the audit firm that we were using lost one of their key staff members in January. They were unable to replace him and are only now completing the audit, much to our great frustration.
Do you have a time frame, Ray, for when you expect that audit to be concluded?
I would say that the last indication I had from them is that we might get a report within the next month.
And a follow-up question is, why wasn't the audit done in December?
Because it wasn't scheduled for December. They pushed it back to January. Originally, it was scheduled for November.
Okay, a follow-on question from Jessica Rapcrossetti is, did the district receive any COVID-19 funds?
So, I'm sorry, would you repeat that, Jim?
Sure. Did the district receive COVID-19 funds?
We received approximately $7,000 in, I believe, April. We have not submitted anything to FEMA as of yet. Any expenses identified as COVID expenses to FEMA and MEMA as of yet.
Do you have a sense for what the order of magnitude of those might be and when the submission might take place?
No, there's no indication when the, at least from what I have been able to read, when MEMA, FEMA anticipates any deadline on submission of those expenses. And range of magnitude, I would hate to make a guess at this point.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions on the finance department? Ken Malloy's comment is that we discussed water stabilization fund earlier to be paid by water revenues. I assume that the warrant article will be transfer and appropriate, not raise and appropriate.
I'll address that when we get to there.
Okay, great. Okay, then why don't we move on to the next section, which is the public buildings.
In the public buildings, the committee is proposing a 2.5% cost of living for the janitor. We've adjusted the electrical to our running rate. The repair for the building has been increased by $1,000, which is the annual floor maintenance for our new floor. However, we were at the same time able to reduce our grounds maintenance to the running rate, so we have a savings there. The phone system is new to the building, and we're adjusting to our experience rate for the building.
Sorry, Amy Cates, would you please be sure you're on mute? Thank you. Sorry, Ray.
So overall, the budget for the Freedom Hall is actually going down by 0.8%, primarily driven by the savings in ground maintenance. Any questions? Or shall I roll through the rest of them and then?
I would roll through the rest of them through streetlights, and then we'll open it up to questions on all of those.
Okay, very good. In the reserve fund, we normally provide $30,000 for the Prudential Committee to accommodate unanticipated expenditures. Given the COVID-19 uncertainty, unknown unknowns, if you will, it appeared prudent for the committee to increase that amount to $60,000. Historically, not all of the reserve fund has been spent. Sometimes 5, occasionally the whole thing has been spent, but it rarely has been spent in its entirety. So if we do not need that money, or if indeed that money is not recoverable from MEMA, FEMA, that would be returned to the general fund and be part of the next year's free cash.
Moving to debt. Yeah.
Debt service is made up of basically two things. Our long-term debt, which are the 2 notes for the 2 new water towers. That comprises about $246,000 of the $539,000 total. Given the free cash availability, the Prudential Committee decided to increase the amount of payment on our short-term debt from $200,000 to $284,000. that reflects the pay down of the $500,000 chemical upgrade and the $470,000 security addition that was made last year, 2 years ago.
And you can,
It's still,
for the
as
audience,
we-
you can see that at the bottom of the page. You can see the debt pay downs and the resulting change in the debt balances.
Yes, thank you, Jim. And pointing out the funding, although I'll deal with funding overall, it's just noteworthy to notice here that all the short-term debt is indeed being paid by prior year savings. Can we move on?
Yes.
Employee benefits. The insurance group that we belong to decided again this year not to have any increase in the medical insurance rates. Although, as Fran noted, they did caution us that there was a potential next year for a 5 to 8% increase. However, this year there was no rate increase, but there were coverage changes, and that resulted in a 6% decline in our health costs. However, as noted below and as mentioned previously, the union contract provides that someone who opts to take insurance from a spouse or other family member can decline coverage at the district and receive a $10,255 stipend. We anticipate 4 individuals will take advantage of that and have accordingly provided $41,000 to accommodate that for next year's budget. The retirement assessment is set by the county. The OPEB trust fund is based on an estimate from our September actuarial study. Last year we estimated high. This year we were able to rationalize it to a lower level. Overall result is $971,000 in employee benefits, of which $200,000 is being paid by free cash. Next slide, Jim. Next slide is library funding. Library funding was determined by the Prudential Committee to be increased 2.53% to $23,265. Stabilization fund. There are 2 components to the stabilization fund: the district standard fund of $25,000 and the stabilization fund recently created by a change in the bylaws to pay into a stabilization fund based on the meter census in each December. As Ken mentioned earlier, it is the funds for that meter charge go into the general fund, and the contribution to the stabilization comes out of the general expenditure. In this case, it's paid out of free cash. On the street lights, we had to adjust the street lights based on our run rate for electricity, but by the same token, looking at our 3-year average maintenance cost, we're able to lower that. Now, I've mentioned electricity increases in about 3 occasions, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to point out that the Prudential Committee has entered into an agreement about receiving solar credits. We didn't have enough information to include any of that this year, but it will be an additional revenue source going forward that will offset many of the increases, not directly, but would effectively offset these electrical increases.
Okay,
The next
then I
is the
think it makes
summary,
sense. Ray, to open up the floor to questions for any of the material that has been discussed: public buildings, reserve, debt, employee benefits, library stabilization, and streetlights. The first question comes from Jay Spence. What is the anticipated savings in healthcare insurance attributed to those expected for individuals who will opt out of health insurance coverage moving forward?
Had they taken the family plan, the lowest cost family plan, it would have cost the district $20,000 instead of the $10,000 that we are paying out as a stipend.
And is that savings reflected in the insurance cost itself?
Not now, because we don't know if they're going to take it. So we have to provide for it on both sides for this year.
I see. So we're actually in the budget reflects the full health insurance cost, assuming they don't make the election, as well as the optional payment in the event that they do.
Yes.
Okay. Amy Cates, you wanted to ask a question?
I did, Jim. Thank you very much. I had unmuted previously because I had sent a note saying I wanted to ask a question of Ray. So I'm sorry for any inconvenience since I was unmuted. But I have two questions for Ray. The first is, if the Prudential Committee are considering replacing the garage doors at 56 High Street, I was wondering why it wasn't in the warrant.
Because it isn't warranted. It doesn't raise to the level of being in the warrant. It would be covered as part of the operating expenses.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Ray. And my second question would be if you could give me a breakout of the Treasury expenses. You could give me your hours on average and what your rate of pay is, and Lisa's hours and what her rate of pay is.
Yes, I can do that. I don't have it at hand, but I can certainly do that and pass that to Jim, and he can share that.
Thank you, Ray.
Thanks, Ray. Cynthia Gardner asked a question. For clarification of our previous question, can you have the information available at the district meeting? What part of free cash is from excess revenue and what part is from budget turn from each department within the district? Turnbacks, that is to say. Just wants to make sure that that information will be available at the time of the district meeting.
Yes,
Is that
I can have, but understand that it is excess revenue, shortfall in expenditures, less the outstanding unpaid taxes at the end of the year, which is the state's arbitrary technique for controlling spending.
outstanding taxes on whom?
The unpaid taxes of the district.
Ah, okay. Okay, are there any other questions on those items for Ray? If not, we would move on to the annual district meeting expense summary. Okay.
Okay. I'm really going to be reading through things that we've already covered, but just in summary, the Finance and Prudential Committee budget is $450,000, an increase of 8%. $60,000 of that is reserve fund to be paid by free cash, $390,000 by the raise and appropriate taxes. The fire department operating budget of 4.42% will be paid by taxes, whereas the SUV for the chief, and then a small amount of expenses that we found that relate to prior years, which require specific approval to pay, $761 will also be paid by free cash. The water department, $721,000, 4.6 is going to be paid by taxes. In the public buildings, and the street lights, both will be paid $30,000 by taxes. The library $23,000 would be paid by free cash. The principal and interest is paid by a combination of free cash, closed articles, and taxes. The employee benefits is also paid by a combination of free cash and taxes. The stabilization fund, $70,000, is paid by free cash. Overall, the total appropriations are up only 2.39% to $4,963,839. Turning to the funding, the first step is we are required by the state to add to the reserve for abatements and unpaid taxes. I'm estimating that amount to be $30,000. We will not get that actual amount until November when we do the tax rate. And then we work backwards. We add up all the other components to force out what the tax levy will be. First of all, we have $15,000 of closed articles. We have $654,000 of free cash, $800,000 of water revenue, and you see the water revenue is up. That's about 85% of what the full estimate is by the water department for their coming year. In agreement with the water department, used 85%, and the reason is this. First of all, the state would resist if I used 100%, but it's always prudent to be conservative on your revenue estimates, because otherwise, if you have a revenue deficit, it automatically goes on your tax bill the next year. So I think this is a reasonable increase in the amount of money to help fund the appropriations. And finally, we have kept the ambulance budget at $226,000. We hope that we will beat that again, but again, it's a conservative estimate. The result then, the remaining amount to be funded is to be covered by a tax levy, and that's $3,298,153. And as you scroll down to the bottom of the page, we've made a rough, and I say rough, estimate of what this would mean to the average taxpayer. The valuation last year was $1,553,000. Excuse me, $1,553,000,000, if I'm reading my decimals right. I'm anticipating at least a level valuation. The only guidance that I saw that came from the state indicated that the valuations should be backward looking. But again, we really don't know that number until November when the town settles it with the state. If that does remain the same, the tax rate would drop from 234 to 218, which for the average $600,000 house would be a tax bill of $1,335, a decline of 7%. I guess if there's any questions then on funding, I'll try to answer those. Jim, you're muted.
Yeah, the first question that we have is from Jessica Grissetti. Does the water revenue go into the general fund?
Yes. It is not an enterprise fund.
Okay. Do we have any other questions from anybody for Ray? Okay, if not, then that will conclude the discussion of the budgets. I'd like to thank everybody who, on behalf of the district, has made their presentations. And we'll move on to the other part of the meeting, which is the candidates and budget candidates discussion. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Mark and Chris. And thank you, Chief Rude and Fran Parks. Okay. Candidates. The order in which we will cover this is the following. I will introduce an individual candidate. They will have an opportunity to say a few words about themselves and the reason they are seeking their position. And then we'll open up to questions that anybody might have for that particular candidate. And we will go in the order in which this is presented. So the first is the Water Department. There is one seat open up, as there is for each of the constituent entities. Tom Hoppenstadt, who is a current commissioner, is running unopposed for re-election. Tom, if you'd like to say a few words.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. So as Jim just mentioned, I'm running for re-election as the Water Commissioner. I think we've made a lot of changes, many changes over the past 3 years, and we can expect more of the same over the next 3. We are currently focused on improving our water conservation practices and programs, as well as taking necessary steps to monitor and improve our district's water quality. Those were both very important items for me 3 years ago, and they remain priorities. I think they're very important. With respect to things we are actively pursuing, most of you probably know we've initiated a 90-day moratorium on the installation of new irrigation systems. So that's new systems, as we study the effects of our water withdrawal and look for alternatives for residents that may be seeking a new irrigation system, either privately sourced or potentially sourced through the water department at an elevated price. We've also been actively pursuing baseline testing and monitoring for the forever chemicals, PFAS, PFOS, that have been linked to illnesses, even at very low concentrations. They're found all around the country. They're costly to remove, right? There's large activated charcoal treatment systems have to be installed if you do find them. And we will be receiving some baseline data on their presence, hopefully their non-presence, non-detections in our water system within the next month or so. Another priority that I have in the next 3 years is to protect our existing lands and watersheds that contribute to our pumping stations. For example, as you know, the Cotuit Elementary School property abuts one of our properties and wellheads, and therefore we're very concerned about any change in land management on that property. We have submitted comments to the town council and look for you, and all of you, for your interest and commitment to protect that property, as it clearly contributes to our drinking water supply. So love to hear more from our constituents about what their level of interest is in protecting that property. Now, I welcome any questions, comments, suggestions, and I serve for your pleasure and the protection of our water, and want to continue to work for another 3 years. Any questions?
Yes. Jessica Rapp-Grassetti just says, thank you for your service, Tom.
My pleasure.
I would echo that. We're very, very grateful to people who serve on these constituent entities. It is a major time commitment, and it reflects great effort on people's parts.
Well, thank you. I'm honored.
Cynthia Gardner would like to thank the water commissioners for their transparency.
Much appreciated. We like transparent water.
Okay, if nobody has any other questions for Tom, again, thank you very much. And we will now turn to the candidates for the open seat on the Fire Department Board of Commissioners. First up to speak is Peter Vollmer. There's no magic to this order. They're just alphabetical by last name. Peter, it's your turn to address the group.
Yes, hello everyone. Peter Vollmer here. I am running for Fire Commissioner. I've lived in Cotuit my whole life, and I have a lot invested in this village. I run a construction business that a good majority of my work takes place in the village. I know a lot of people around the village and have, helped and worked with a lot of different people around town. And I just figured that if I could help at all serve my village public service, I would try and do so. And I believe that the fire department is a very essential business, and I feel like the guys do a great job in our little village. And if I can help in any way and keep that running smoothly and keep them all on the right track, then I'm happy to do so. So any questions or anything, give it a shot, but that's my little spiel for now.
Thanks, Peter. Questions from Jessica Rapcorsetti. Have you ever attended a fire commissioners meeting?
No, I have not.
Okay. Amy Cates, if you would like to ask a question, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Peter, Jessica again opened the door for me. That was going to be my first question about attendance at fire commissioners meetings, because I don't ever recall seeing you at the meeting. And so I was interested in what brought you to a point where you had wanted to serve. But my two questions are probably basic fire service knowledge. I was wondering if you know the difference between an EMT and a paramedic, if you know the training for either of those positions and what the difference is between the two positions.
Honestly, no, I don't know the specific ins and outs of that. Where, the question is of, have I ever attended? No, I haven't. Just to clarify, I'm younger, I have a young family, I run my own business, things get busy. And at some point you have to, decide if you want to be involved or not. And it was brought to my attention that, it would be up for an election. And I jumped in and, tried to see if I could help or, serve in any way. So like I said, I'm trying to break into this and get my feet into it. Like I said, I've lived at Cotuit my whole life. I've been around, I know people, I talk to people. So yes, I understand that I'm, not, ingrained into that. I've been to meetings or been trained on specific things, but general knowledge and dealing with the fire departments, dealing with permitting, building, I'm in the construction business. I think I have a good knowledge of, how things work, what they're faced with on a day-to-day basis. And like I said, I just generally want to help, my community if I can.
Thanks, Peter. With your indulgence, Jim, could I ask Peter another question?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay. My other question was, I know that you're a builder, that you're a contractor. I was wondering what your education is, any business education. So that would be my next question. The fire department, I think, has about a $3 million budget. And so I was just wondering about, your business experience that you could lend to your position on the fire commissioners.
Just
Yeah,
to be
of course.
clear, the budget is $2 million.
$2 million. I stand corrected. Thank you very much, Jim. Go ahead, Peter. Thank you.
Yep. No, I graduated from Barnstable High School. I attended 2 years of community college at Cape Cod Community College. And I took, many business classes and also, other classes to do my 2 years there. I run my business. I'm in charge. I do the budget. I, do the books. I pay people, I do my taxes, like all that kind of stuff. And, $2 million sounds like a lot to many, but in my business, that's, a normal figure, throughout years of work. And, I deal with high numbers all the time, and buying equipment, buying, products or, things that I need. So I have a, good understanding of what things cost, what it takes to run things. And, like I said, I feel like I've, run a successful business, and, have, been in charge of my own business at 34 years old for, over 5 years solid. And before that, was heavily involved since I was 18 years old.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Jim.
Okay, any other questions for Peter? Okay, the other candidate for the seat on the fire department is actually the incumbent, Adam Zace, who is running for re-election.
Thanks, Jim. Pardon me. When I ran for my first seat on the board 3 years ago, I suggested then that my nearly 40 years of experience in high-tech startup companies in roles such as a founder, CEO, head of sales would be a great background to bring to the Board of Fire Commissioners. That experience allowed me to develop skills in negotiation, communication, collaboration, managing budgets, thinking outside the box, and handling all sorts of personnel issues. It turns out I was right. During the past 3 years on the board, we've hired a new chief, negotiated 2 collective bargaining contracts with the firefighters union. We've interviewed new hires. We've prepared the annual budgets for the district. We've helped increase the ambulance revenues for the services provided, improve the the internet capacity at the station. Happily, we've issued a number of letters of commendation, unfortunately worked through some conflicts. So all those things that I said would be useful to bring to the board turned out to be very much part of what we did every meeting and in between in prep for all the work that we've done. So along that way, I've developed, I think, a great working relationship with my other board members and the chief. We're very able to efficiently discuss issues, and although we don't always agree, we make decisions of which we're very proud. I've also had the honor to represent the board on the Policy Advisory Committee, working with other board members and citizens of the village, the results of which were recently presented to the public. I strongly believe that there's still much work to be done to continue to support the chief in leading the Cotuit Fire Department and providing the best level of emergency services to the village, fostering a great work culture there. Yet, while also striving to be as fiscally prudent as possible. Some of the challenges in the Fire Commission is that we do have a collective bargaining agreement, and so it's sort of like we have an opportunity every so often to do that. But during every year, we're always trying to figure out ways to add services, increase training, and try to save money. This is work that I want to continue. I've been in Cotuit since 1981. I was reminiscing recently. It's like 37 4th of July parades, 7 Kettleer championships, and only 1 ambulance call for my family. So I think it's been a lot of fun for me to live in Cotuit. I enjoy the honor of working on the Board of Commissioners, and I ask that you give me the opportunity to continue this work on the behalf of you and the village. And thank you. I'll turn it back over to you, Jim.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, anybody have any questions for Adam? Or is the fact that he's a known quantity going to inspire people to just based on his record? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Adam. We'll move on to the Prudential Committee candidates. There are two people running for this position, which had been filled by Lisa Mycock Kelly. We would be remiss if we didn't thank her for her service. Her professional life has become much more complicated, and she's not really in a position to devote the kind of time that she needs to devote in order to be an effective member of the committee. So Lisa, thank you very much. There are two people who are standing for election for this position. The first is Seth Burdick, no stranger to most of you. So Seth, if you'd like to spend a few moments talking about yourself and why you're interested in serving on the Prudential Committee, we'd love to hear from you.
Sure. Well, my name is Seth Burdick, and I am the owner and operator of the Cotuit Fresh Market along with my wife. And as a small business person, I tend to be bottom line oriented. And I have open lines of communication with lots of the village. I like to get involved, and I thought that I could be helpful to the process.
Terrific. Anybody have any questions for Seth? A question from Jessica Grissetti. Have you ever attended a Prudential Committee meeting?
Yes.
Are you aware that the committee held 35 meetings in 2019 and thus far 15 in 2020? Knowing how busy you are at the Cotuit market, are you prepared and will you be able to attend 30 plus meetings a year?
Yes, I will. I'll make myself available.
Okay. Amy Cates, you have a question you'd like to ask? You can open your mic now.
Yes, thank you, Jim. Seth, I know that you attended fire commissioners, I might have been fire commissioners, it might have been Prudential, but I saw you at a meeting and that spurred me to actually go personally introduce myself to you and to find out a little bit more about why you wanted to serve. And having served on Prudential myself for 3 years, I realized that it's very helpful if someone has a basic and kind of working knowledge of municipal accounting, bylaws, mass general laws, and so that it isn't so much learning on the job. So I know about your work at the Cotuit Fresh Market and what a good job that you and your wife do. But I was wondering if you could share with us maybe some of your educational credentials.
Well, I don't have a ton of educational credentials, really. I never did complete college. I have a lot of on-the-job training. I've run a number of different businesses over the years, including the one that I run now. And I find that, you know, if a balance sheet is a balance sheet, and if you can pay attention to the important aspects of a balance sheet, that you can budget effectively and you can monitor the activity and the health of an organization. And yeah, as far as education, I don't really have any specific education that would pertain to this. I've had a lot of education recently in the open meeting law and conflict of interest and ethics. But I feel that it wouldn't be a great hurdle for me to jump to acquaint myself with the intricacies of the pertaining specifically to the Prudential Committee and the municipal law.
Thanks, Seth. And I think actually with COVID and running a business like you do, I think that you've had to learn quickly and adjust quickly to a lot of what's being suggested in terms of COVID protection. So I'm sure that's been a challenge and managing people. I was wondering, I don't know if you actually indicated why you had an interest in running for this position. I don't recall if you said that in your opener, and I wondered if you could share that with us now.
Well, I feel that I have a vested interest in Cotuit, owning a home here and a business and raising a child. And I have, you know, I love Cotuit as much as any of you do. And I believe that, you know, through my own participation, rather than just sit on the sidelines, I can help to maintain the, you know, the aesthetic of Cotuit. keep it a vibrant and flourishing place that is not upside down financially.
Great.
Thanks, Seth, and thanks, Jim.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Seth?
I have one out there, Jim, I think. Can you
Hello,
hear me?
Lisa. I can hear you.
I, for one, would like to thank Seth for all he has done for our little village during this crisis. I have said to countless people how I feel like I had a little bit of normalcy in my world, because there were people coming and going into my local store, and Seth was always so welcoming. And I just want to, and it might not be the appropriate venue, but Seth, thank you so much for these months that we have dealt with. And
Well, thank you. And thank you all.
always open and welcoming and doing anything you can. I deal with elderly. I know for a fact that Seth delivered to many, many of my clients in his personal vehicle.
Well, thank you. I
Meal.
appreciate it. At least I do.
So I think the Civic Association and the Village of Cotuit should just hats off to Seth and what he and his wife have done at the Cotuit Village Market. I don't think I could have gone through this pandemic without you guys.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you to everyone in the village.
That's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Lisa. A comment from Kate McMahon. Hear, hear. Thank you to Seth and the Coop team.
Thank you.
And I think that everybody shares in that sense of gratitude in the village for your guys hanging in there and being there for everyone. Anybody have any other questions for Seth? Okay, then Cynthia Gardner is the other candidate for the Prudential Committee seat. Cynthia, why don't you take the floor and tell us what you want to tell us?
Okay, good evening, and I want to thank everybody who signed in this evening to the Zoom meeting. What I would like to see is a vote from you, is a vote for transparency and bringing back fiscal responsibility to this village. I have been involved in Cotuit Fire District politics for over 40 years. I can probably say I've attended more meetings than most. I've gone to water commissioners meetings, fire department meetings, Prudential Committee meetings. I'm running for Prudential Committee this year instead of fire department, because I feel that the fiscal responsibility is really something that we need to, as a village, address. I really think in times like this, we should have at least stayed to budgets within 2.5% increases, like our towns that surround us are doing, like Mashpee, Sandwich. And I really feel that we need to do a better job at that. So I ask you for your vote next Tuesday for a vote for transparency and fiscal responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Anybody have any questions? Amy Cates, you had questions?
I do. Cindy, I remember I've been here 30 years, and I didn't really branch out to serve the community when I first came, but I served a number of years on the Civic Association, and then I served on Prudential from 2010 to 2013. But I remembered that at every annual meeting that I went to, I saw this woman get up, and I didn't know you then. I know you a lot better now, but I didn't know you then. And at every meeting you would get up and you would be prepared, and you would say something that you thought would matter, or you would ask a question that might challenge the people that served us. And finally, I went and introduced myself to you, and I said, "So what's going on?" And I sensed that you were someone that was committed to the district, and I wanted to find out more about your passion and your knowledge, and why you were so enthralled and interested and passionate about this district and its finances and what was going on. So I do have a question, but I wanted to say that for all of the people who may not know you as well as I have gotten to you, that that you are high energy, you are passionate, you are involved, you are a warrior, you are committed to the success of this district. And I think that we would be immensely rewarded by your service to the district if, in fact, you were elected to Prudential. You didn't tell us about your educational credentials, and I wondered if you would be willing to share that with us.
Well, thank you, Amy. I do have a master's in nursing. I spent most of my career in education and management. I understand budgets. I understand doing payrolls. I understand dealing with union contracts and negotiations. And these are all things that I would like to see the district do better in. One thing I would like to say is 40 years ago, when you would go to a meeting of the district, there'd be a dozen people at that meeting, and those dozen people had the opportunity to give public comment at the beginning and at the end, and sometimes even in the middle if they had something to offer. I would like to see the citizens of this district come back to the meetings and have more opinions offered to the representatives so that we would understand what the people of this district would like us to do for them.
Okay.
Thank you, Cindy, and thanks, Jim.
You're welcome. Ken Malloy expressed something that I think all of us would share. As I mentioned earlier, these positions require a significant investment of time and energy, and we're all very grateful to everybody's willingness to serve. So thank you to all of the candidates who have agreed to stand for election. Tom, Peter, Adam, Seth, and Cindy. We are all very grateful that people in the village care enough about the village to dedicate their time. Does anybody have any other questions? Seeing none, I thank everybody for sticking with us. I know that.
Excuse me, be sure to vote, everybody.
Yes, Ken Malloy's advice is make sure you vote on election day on Tuesday, and make sure you show up for the annual district meeting next week. And the purpose of this is so that we can have as informed a citizenry when it comes to those elections and meetings as possible. So we hope we have fulfilled that function for people tonight. And as I said, we will be sending out the link for the recording of this meeting as soon as it's available. So thank you, everybody. That will conclude our meeting for this evening.
Thank you, Jim, and thanks, everybody.
Perfect.
I was okay.
Yeah, perfect. Except you kept looking at me.